Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our coaching, publishing, executive ghostwriting, and podcast production services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by Dr. Rachel Allyn, who is currently writing her first book called Pure Pleasure that will be released either at the end of this year or early in 2021. Dr. Rachel, welcome to the show.
It is my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Are you ready to begin?
Yeah, I'm all set.
All right. Question number one. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
Well, and yeah, as I think about that question, it's really sort of like, oh, so you mean someone like me?
Absolutely.
Who's currently writing their first book. Yeah. So I'm intimately connected to that question. One of the things that has been just so invaluable for me is that I asked around and I was able to really find some people who are, smarter than me in this whole business, really wise, smart people, to not only give me some support, but also to give me some tough love. One of my favorite stories actually is as I was working on my book proposal. I'd never ever done a book proposal before. I mean, I got my PhD in clinical psychology, not really, so I did write a dissertation, but it's, it's very academic sort of writing, very cerebral. And so as I was trying to write my book proposal for my first, nonfiction book, I sent it to a woman and she wrote back saying, so you're writing a book about pleasure, and yet this was really an unpleasurable book proposal to read. And you think that I might have been wounded or hurt by that, but I just so appreciated that she went straight to the point of, look, this is what you're wanting to evoke in the people reading your book, and yet you're writing it as if it's your dissertation. So really people who are smarter than you that can give you real tough, honest feedback, and of course support. I mean, it's all kind of needs to be bound up together. So I think that's something that I would suggest to people. Just ask around for anybody who might be, and that you might be able to afford, because it's not going to always be people who, of course, are doing it for free. But that was really the turning point for me, was finding this developmental editor who was able to take me in and give me that feedback.
And what do you feel is the hardest part so far about getting published?
Well, as I mentioned, since I have been in the psychology world, my sense is that trying to really just connect to the industry of writing and publishing, given, even within my private practice, I'm wearing a lot of hats. I'm a therapist, but I also teach yoga and do mind-body retreats, and I also do my own billing and I wear all these different hats, and yet to add in and trying to kind of get into the writing world, I just had no idea where I was going to find the time. So I think for sure the first thing is just how to connect to an industry that you feel like you might have imposter syndrome. Like, who am I to write a book that people would care about reading? I don't walk into my office with clients feeling like an imposter. I've had, hundreds and hundreds and maybe thousands of client hours. So I feel a confidence there that I hadn't felt as far as with writing. And so I think connecting to that industry and feeling like you have a message, you have a voice, even if it's not been your primary line of work. So I think there's that element. And then also, as I mentioned, the time. I think every writer would say figuring out your method for discipline and making the time. As you just heard, I was talking about how I wear all these different hats in my private practice. And so I have, a whole host of excuses. I never am short of excuses due to my professional and personal life as to why I just don't have time for writing. And so what has been helpful for me is to actually see taking the time to write as an act of self-care and self-love. Just as I might just as I do make time to exercise, or I make time to connect to loved ones. And if I didn't have connection to loved ones or connection to my body with exercise, other things would fall apart. So I wanted to really experiment with seeing my writing as like, can that be one of my top 3 non-negotiables as far as self-care and just waking up, and nothing else can interfere with that time, because I know that I've done it like with exercise. So so that's not really specific to getting published, exactly, but it is just as far as the building blocks. That was one of the hardest things for me is time management.
Well, let's talk about marketing. So please share a marketing strategy that you're planning to use in your book launch that you feel is going to work well.
Marketing, yeah, that is an area that I didn't go to business school, so I've certainly been trying to learn more and more about marketing. And there's what I'm currently amping up as far as preparing for my book launch is again, finding somebody who I can delegate to, who I can afford, who is smarter than me in marketing. And that's not hard to do, to be smarter than me in marketing, since that's not, again, my area of expertise. But finding somebody who really is smarter than you, who then keeps you on task. And so I have just started working with somebody who, they schedule out for me when I am going to be putting up posts and the topic, and then also you do it in advance. So rather than just sort of whimsically waking up and deciding, do I want to post something or not, ideally what you do and what I'm starting to do is Sunday afternoon, get them all set for the next couple of weeks, have those posts and that theme all ready, so I'm not in a place where it's easy just to postpone or I don't feel inspired. So really ultimately I think that picking the top 3 types of social media, whether it be Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn or something, I think those top 3 that really are going to be the best messenger for your unique voice, and then having that person help you with the commitment to scheduling. That's what we'll see how well it works, but that's certainly what I know a lot of people do. And it just takes time. I think you just have to kind of keep chipping away at it. And the other thing too with that is, as somebody in their 40s, I always think twice before I want to post something on social media. And so sometimes I feel like I need to be more like my 20-something friends and colleagues who they really just throw it out there, less concerned about how perfect it is, but just to sort of get the content out there and flowing on a regular basis consistently.
Well, speaking of books, I'd like to know, what is your favorite book and what was the number 1 thing that you learned from it?
It's hard for me to pick one. So given that I tend to be a rule breaker, I'm going to give you 2. But they both have to do with like really pivotal times in my professional life. The first one is a book called Love's Executioner. So real happy title there, Love's Executioner, by Irvin Yalom. But it is a book that really inspired me to go ahead and get my PhD in clinical psychology. And it's a series of short stories that are all based on his experience with his patients. He calls them patients. I call all the people I work with clients. But there are all these really poignant and tender, beautiful stories about different people's lives and the connection that he developed with people. So I think for anybody who also likes, shorter stories, quicker reads, since we're all a little bit in a hurry these days, and if you're just interested in like the human condition and his style of more existential therapy, but you're really drawn into these characters' lives and the evolution of their therapeutic work with him. And then the only other book I would add is that another one that was really made an impact on me. This was when I first decided to do my yoga teacher training, and a lot of my work combines mind and body. So yoga, movement, and methods into the psychotherapy. So when I did my yoga teacher training, the first book that we had to read was called After the Ecstasy, The Laundry. So another really great title, After the Ecstasy, The Laundry, which really is about the spiritual journey, a spiritual path, and all that can come up along a spiritual path. But then how do we really kind of bring some of that illumination and the growth into the day-to-day life? I mean, we can't go live and be a monk and live in the Himalayas. We can't detach from the day-to-day world and all the things that are going to trigger us. So it's like how to coexist when there's been a spiritual path and enlightenment with also the fact that we are, human beings, and we are going to be kind of triggered and deal with the mundane as well. And it's by Jack Kornfield, and he also just has a lot of really neat quotes and inspirational quotes, and a lot of his own stories of his journey. So those are really the two that I'm going to throw out there as my favorite books.
And for a final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
I'm a big fan of Mary Oliver. I know a lot of people are, but the Mary Oliver quote, it's actually the very tail end of one of her poems, which is, to live in this world, you must be able to do three things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends on it, and when the time comes to let it go, to let it go. And I love this quote. It almost just brings, like, my heart just stops sometimes, even when I say it, because I find it so moving. I think it really captures both the idea of living your life fully. So living an engaged, awake, and connected life, connected to what you love and who you love, yet with the skill, the ability of being able to surrender, which we all need to do as well. So it's this idea of attaching fully, but also detaching fully when we need to. I work with a lot of couples, and sometimes the hardest thing is just knowing when they should let go and say they've kind of tried hard enough. And I think that's its own type of wisdom of, like, when you don't keep grasping and clinging, and, like, how to just, if you love someone, let them go, or you love something, let them go, because everything is always evolving. So that little chunk of the Mary Oliver poem is my favorite quote.
Well, Dr. Rachel, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
My website is a pretty good one-stop shop for everything. So it's Dr. and then Rachel Allyn, Allyn with a Y, ALLYN.com. I also have an Instagram, which is pleasure_expert. And a Facebook, which is Holistic Psychology by Rachel Allyn, PhD. So those are probably the best ways to find me, yeah. I'm doing some more online curriculum and courses as well, so it doesn't matter geographically where people are anymore. So, really excited to expand more and get some of my work of mind-body psychology and healthy relationship and sexual health, help really get that out there to people beyond my office.
Well, Dr. Rachel, I want to thank you once again for being on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Thank you so much. This has been wonderful. I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how you can be featured in our brand new Get Published business book, go to getpublishedpodcast.com.